Hello everybody and welcome back to This is the Year, the Swiss Artificial Intelligence podcast where we deconstruct all things that have been happening in the large world of artificial intelligence. I'm your host and moderator Cyril, and with me today again are the two typical guests, and maybe quickly I can introduce the first one. He is currently building agent-to-agent systems. He is leveraging the latest tools such as MCP, and more on that in a second in the show. And that is the AI engineering wizard, João. How is life? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Is it code? Is it magic? It's a bit of both to do AI. Hopefully we can talk all about it in a few minutes.
It is probably a good mix of the both. I feel every week there's like a new tool coming out. Now we have like MCPs and like agent to agent stuff talking about today as well. So it just feels like every single week there's something new. That's why this is the year. That's why we're shooting this particular podcast. Also with us today, the second guest for episode 5. Also quickly before we introduce the second magician, basically, we do shoot these videos every single week. We post them on Spotify, on YouTube. If you have anything and any topic we should be covering, feel free to drop a comment at any given time. Let me introduce the second person on the podcast today, the AI magician. He's currently building and really making sure the AI agents are actually working the way they're supposed to. Scaling up the system is one of the core ingredients of this man's task. Bene, how are you doing? I think you were the ones that last week you were bouldering. The weather wasn't good. Good to see you again. You didn't fall from the boulder.
Life is great. A bit tired. Haven't been sleeping much at home lately. Good life. Yeah.
He's a rascal. Stay away from him.
Come
Except
on.
for code, he's safe, but for everything else, avoid him.
He is not really safe. It was funny because Ben announced I'm going to do like a vast array of research for this episode. And then before he joins the show, it's like, I did research, but not on the promise I was making in the first place. All right, guys, let's get into the roster of topics. We have a few things to be talking about. Maybe we can kick it off by some of the, let's say, testing I've been doing on my end. I spent a fair degree of time since the last episode trying out agent builders, mostly because you both were basically telling that this is not sufficient for banking grade AI engineering. So I was just trying to make sure that I have some counter arguments. And of course, I have been using these systems over the last few months before, but I think this week I just made a conscious effort to really be going a little bit deeper of how far I can push these systems. And I can kick it off, and you can then take it from here by trying out N8N, which is basically, as you, Bene, also asked me some days ago, what is it in the first place? The elevator pitch for N8N is basically a very easy to use, low to no code AI agent builder. The way it really works is literally by dragging and dropping particular elements. In my particular case, just to bring this up a little bit in a practical example, I was vibe coding literally a front end using V0. Maybe I can put a picture on that as well on the screen here. And the back end, basically the AI engineering components, I was using N8N. And I would still, to be honestly, say that it was fairly impressive. Within 2 to 2.5 hours, I had a fully working front end in React and had a fully-ish working backend using GPT-4o for communications from the user to an agent, basically. The agent was, in that particular example, I was building a Swiss compliance agent, basically, within a SaaS. So you can think about a Swiss compliance officer might be getting some alerts. Could it be from a bank or an insurance? And this particular professional would then be talking to an agent. So that's basically what I've been building, more or less successfully, and it was super fast. So that's maybe the elevator pitch of N8N. It is fast, it is efficient, and unless you do not store customer-sensitive data, or generally speaking, company-sensitive data, I think it's sufficient. But that's the elevator pitch. Guys, what do you think about no-code to low-code agent builders? I think we covered that in the past. But where, and this maybe leads me to the first question, where would you say these systems just generally lack, and why do we need banking grade AI engineering, mostly what you guys have been doing? Maybe we can start with you, João, and then Bene, you can complement or challenge João again.
I think I'm torn, basically, because on one side I'm supposed to be biased for coding and like custom solutions, because I've been coding 15 years, and as a programmer, as a software developer, I could never give away my job to AI fully. On the other side, I am an AI engineer, so I am supposed to be biased for the AI. So AI is pretty good now. The LLMs are getting better and they're pretty good writing code. That's undeniable. I use them mostly every day. I don't think it can do the full job of a me to senior engineer yet, mostly because it doesn't have the full scope of the project. So these LLMs and technically you're always giving it some sort of inputs and it's only seeing what you give it. And unless you're giving it the whole code base and the whole requirements and all the opinions of the people, stakeholders in the project, the business insiders, you only see part of that. And as an engineer, you accumulate your memories and you know all of this when you're building things. So it's kind of a context problem, right? And we're working on it. We're getting smarter and knowing what we show the LLMs and what not to show them. And so they're getting better, but I don't think it's there yet for a full production-ready enterprise system that connects to whatever you want it to connect. So your database, your customer-sensitive data, I think it's not there yet. I think it's getting close, but these tools like N8N and some others that will come, I think they're pretty useful, especially for more personal applications. So if you have your workflow and your emails, your calendar, and if you want to set up things there, I think you could do it. For enterprise level systems, they'll be putting a whole lot of trust in someone else's system, and I just don't think that's the way to go right now. It might change in a couple of weeks. You got to stay tuned to the podcast to hear us change in real time. Our opinions.
I think it's certainly a good notion. I mean, something I've just tried to do is replicate with vibe coding and with N8N agent building, basically a banking grade software. So of course you can do that in like a very short period of time. I was just trying to make sure that whatever we were separately building, for example, you can then be also building with vibe coding and then fairly fast. So I think the notion on these systems is really maybe if you're building a proof of concept, if you're building maybe a minimal viable product, minimal lovable product you would like to be testing with a client, or maybe with an internal user even, and you can actually do that in a very short period of time. But maybe production ready, I would say there's certain limitations. Bennett, you agree or disagree with the notion that you can build fast, but when it's production ready to be scaled up, it certainly lacks currently the, let's say, the actual velocity, or where do you stand there? Is it ready or is it not ready?
It's not ready, just to be clear. And while João was talking, I was thinking a bit about the state we are currently. And one of the things that was really interesting, it's like he mentioned the context. Right now we don't have enough context. But recently, like 2 weeks ago or so, and I think we talked about this on the last episode, Gemini released the Gemini 2.5, which the context is a really good, effective context. And it was this week on the 9th, so 2 days ago.
Maybe Bennett, quickly, what is context for the audience? What does it entail, maybe for the non-technical people in the audience?
Context for the LLM is basically the amount of information he can process, I would say, in a really simplistic term.
But that's context capacity. Context is usually what we send it. So we send it about like, imagine in the case of building a software, right? You send it all the code it has written, all the requirements of the code, some of the bugs of the code, so we can know all those things. It doesn't know anything except of what you've shown it, and so you have to be careful to include everything you wanted in that context. Yeah, go ahead.
The thing here is, João was mentioning, when models have this capability, developers are without a job, because honestly, let's be completely transparent here. We as developers, we don't have the whole context. If the business gives the input, it can be biased and so on. And sometimes it's so many inputs along with the requirements and then the code base, we still need time to process, and then we still need to refine with the customer. If these tools, they will get there. Let's be completely transparent and honest. The way things are progressing, they will get there, and it won't take long. But right now they are not ready, and you still need someone to fully entrust, because even though tools are getting and these models are getting really good, they are still not completely secure. They're not going to complete all the mainly like security requirements, because this was talked on the previous episodes as well. They generate these massive codes and really good, but if you can easily break them, there was this comment I read on Reddit or some social network. Basically the guy was like, oh, we don't need developers anymore. It's great. I developed the whole website in 1 day. After he posted that on X, after 1 day, I was like, man, I need help. Things are not working out. People are breaking it so easily, generating keys and whatnot. Because these tools, they don't take security under consideration. This actually is a good business case. Have these tools with security enhancement to make sure these are built fast, good, and secure.
I think the best solution and like the best combination possible is joining experienced software developers, experienced engineers that know these things with AI tools. And these AI tools, like the best of them are paid. Of course, it's a business model. It costs a lot of money, a lot of power to run them, but I think it's cost effective. I think your return on investment is way bigger than a whole lot of things your company usually spends money on. It's the same thing with coffee. Like coffee costs your costs your company money, but the productivity you get out of your employers, the satisfaction you get, there's been studies about this, that it's actually a very good investment for your company to have free coffee. Yeah.
Really? Well, that's probably true, yeah. If you don't have to pay 1 or 2 Swiss francs for a coffee and you can just get unlimited resources, aka coffee, or in that particular notion now, AI engineering tools that do most of the heavy lifting. I don't know if coffee will do most of the heavy lifting for you, other than you are being able to do more of the heavy lifting.
Basically, you're enabling your employees to do way more.
Yeah, probably. I mean, there is like, on the sustainability front, it maybe varies a little bit. But yeah, certainly this is...
I think you'd run out of employees in a few months, but you can always hire more.
Because of health issues. Okay, so maybe if we round up this point, so agent builders are getting there, as to be basically mentioning what Bene is saying. The current constraints with agent builders, especially are in Switzerland, maybe even if it's sensitive data, because you need to be trusting these systems with potentially sensitive data. The other notion is just the general way they actually engineer code might not be the most secure way of engineering code. This is highly important, especially if you're a Swiss business and you are using these particular AI agent, let's say, workflow tools. You're just outsourcing most of kind of the thinking of security to these systems, and that might not be the best way of basically engineering customer-facing software in the first place. So these are the current constraints. Maybe otherwise is also, like, I noticed that you need to have some time to get used to building with these systems, because it's not actually developing code. Even though you can include code in there, you still have to have a skill, certainly. In the same way that you build on, let's say, Versal v0 or a Lovable, that the interface is actually text. So you just literally give a prompt. It's much more the sense that you still need to have certain knowledge of how you actually apply an A2A in that particular example to your use case. Maybe some notion, if we do the segue maybe to the next topic, is an AI agent in itself, or himself. Benna, you even gave it a gender. So for today, it might be a him, is fairly useless potentially without interacting with a system that he or it is actually exposed to. For example, backend systems, for example, different tools, maybe web services, maybe mail services, and so on and so forth. So let's quickly segue maybe into the agent to tool communication. And then from there, we can take it to agent communication. So two of the current, I would say, hottest topics are maybe these two notions. If we start with agent to tools, in the last episode, on a high level, we quickly introduced MCP. In the meantime, I just saw a tweet yesterday by Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, basically mentioning that they are very keen of also adopting MCP, which is basically an Anthropic-based protocol, into their services. Again, for the audience, Anthropic is not by Google. It's very much closer to AWS. So it's an interesting notion that they're kind of also adopting MCP as a protocol. But maybe, again, Joao, the elevator pitch for MCP. How would you sell this protocol if you had to sell it?
So, just sorry, correction. It's not It's Anthropic who developed the protocol, but it's an open source protocol.
Yeah, they're actually being pretty open about it, and they're inviting people to work on it and to expand it as the need arises. So it's supposed to be a thing that's universally adopted by everyone. There's this slight problem with standards and protocols in the IT business as a whole, which is there's 6 different standards, and someone thinks, okay, let's make this one universal standard, and then there's 7 different standards, and this just repeats. So hopefully MCP is widely adopted, and no one gets the idea to just create MCP.2, but Anthropic had a pretty good idea. So these agents, these LLMs exist, and they're pretty good, but they don't really have access to your files, and that's a good thing, right? Like, you don't want ChatGPT to know your personal email unless you explicitly tell it to. And so MCP is just a standardized way of creating these tools and have a way to connect them with these LLMs. So, and it's model agnostic, so it doesn't have to be LLMs from Anthropic, which is the whole Claude lineup. It can be ChatGPT and GPT's models from OpenAI. It can be Gemini from Google, or Llama from Meta, or any other LLM that's around there. So what you do is you create these tools like MCP describes. MCP also has a way for you to publish these tools online, so agents can connect them, can find them, and can know what they do. And so as an LLM, imagine for a second that you are an LLM. You receive a request. Let's say, hey, what do I have to do today? Right? I'm a business analyst, like what's on my to-do list. And you see in your pocket that you have like these tools. One of them like see this person's email, see the calendar, see what the personal notes they have. And it's not publicly available information. These are explicit tools that you're giving to that specific LLM. So you're not data leaking everywhere. It's just you're consciously giving one LLM access to your data. And that LLM now has access to see your email, your calendar, your notes, whatever else you have, and can tell you what you have to do. It can help you in your workflow. And this is the same thing with companies. It can be their database, it could be their files, their CRM software. MCP becomes like this standardized universal protocol, which means your agents could maybe use different tools. You don't have to build all the tools for your project. Maybe you want to use some Google tools for research online. Maybe you want to use some Confluence Atlassian tools, the guys behind Jira. That's pretty universal now. So if you have these tools available and they're online and there's like a standardized way to connect them, you don't have to code as much. And I think we're moving to universe where there's very little code written for each project. And this becomes a super easy thing. So just a bigger point that agents are on the rise, and they're going to be able to connect pretty much everything, hopefully securely.
If we address the timing quickly, why do you believe now it's like the time this is really flying? Because I think the protocol itself was announced like some months ago, I think in November. I've seen it on the website of Anthropic. Like, why is it now in April 2025 that this like is a bit of momentum created around this particular protocol?
I think in its time, no one wants to be the first one to do it. Otherwise, they spend time and energy on something that dies after a while. And Google was known for this. Like, Google was releasing products and people were really excited about it, really hyped about them. And then Google would kill these projects. Like, there's this modular phone that never came out. People were really excited for. And this is the thing, like, tech companies announce things, but they announce they're going to be releasing it in a few months, but sometimes the few months never come. And so I think companies and overall the IT universe was slightly skeptic of this protocol, but as it is open source and as people are adopting it more and more, I think people are getting into it. I think it's not fully complete as security-wise, as creating this, let's say, marketplace of tools that you can use, but it's getting there, and it's now in a state that you can start to use it. And I think that's why people are starting to use it.
I think it's a good point. Maybe I will also mention that on N8N, like just the workflow build I was mentioned beforehand, you can also leverage these protocols as well. So maybe for the audience that are maybe in need or interested in more insights there, I will be putting a tutorial on using MCP on N8N on YouTube in the days to come. Just that we can also be explaining a little bit behind the actual podcast here. How do we, just from an engineering perspective, while still considering security, leveraging such tools in the first place. Now we quickly covered, just to make that intermediate conclusion, we need such protocols because, again, isolation of AI agents, particularly if you're a Swiss business, a European or a global business, it's no different. You would not want them to be isolated. So you would want them to be having an interaction with the way they actually are living. If we again say this is a he, so he is living in some IT landscape, and him just walking around and doing random work is fairly non-value adding work. So you want to be this person, aka the AI, actually interacting with your system, leveraging the data, leveraging particular tools, again, that you might as a company not develop yourself. That brings me maybe to, if we transition to maybe another topic quickly, agent to agent, A2A. Different thinking maybe, or maybe similar thinking, but Bennett, you mentioned that before we started recording quickly. What's your take on A2A? What's it actually all about, and what's the difference maybe to MCP?
The more I think about it, I will get into that, the more excited I think about the possibilities of this. A2A, it's basically a new protocol, an open protocol that Google envisioned. It's agent to agent. It's communication between agents, simplifying. What does it have? It has like capability discovery. So each model has its agent card in a standardized format, a JSON, which explains more or less the capabilities of each agent. I was just thinking about it, like in terms of where would you apply this? And one scenario is my company has an agent that handles the integrations and the communications for several services, and it's kind of managing, and anytime someone needs some information, it can text the bot. Since he has the tools to connect to the backend, he can do the integrations and gets the answer. Let's say now I have a project that I want to integrate with that company. I could use this agent protocol. And from my end, let's say I also have my agent. And with this protocol, the agents can talk to each other. They can communicate on the best formatting to receive and to communicate the answers. There's also the output of the task, and this is called like an artifact, because it's not only text, but image, voice, whatever. So it's agnostic to the type of conversation, not specific. The more I was researching this, the more my mind blew up on if this kicks in and if this takes off with the agentic approach, with MCP, with the protocol. For each company has their own, and then at my company, I want to connect, and a lot of people use some common tools, as João mentioned, Jira, GitLab, or whatnot. These tools can be universal to connect to those platforms. And then applying this protocol as a consulting company or as external company, I can easily implement and communicate securely, guarantee a secure channel for the agents from each company to talk to ease other, and ease up the job so much for developers. One of the pains that we do have nowadays is integrating with old systems and new systems, and it's just different into integrations. Of course, nowadays we have REST APIs, and
even that can be like its own format. So I can think of an
exactly.
example that would resonate with a lot of people, but maybe scare them a little bit, which is, have you heard about this show? Not really common. It's called The Office.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, like those two people out there, I think what
I
they're
haven't
mostly
seen much of that. So I
we
probably
have one
one of-
people. We have
I'm
one
already
people
one.
here.
I'm already one.
one of them. In The Office, what they're pretty much doing is they're getting orders on the phone, and they're a paper company, right? And what they do is they get the order, they ask some questions: what kind of paper do you want? How much paper do you want? And then they write it down, and then the logistics department, the warehouse downstairs, sends it out. One agent, possibly, for that paper company.
Stopping. It's scary as what you're saying. I get
because
what you're going.
we would never
Keep
have
going.
The Office if we had AI a little bit earlier.
You could. It would
Imagine
be funny.
that paper company has one agent. It's basically receiving those orders. And that agent, what does it access to? It has access to what your warehouse contains, so what kind of your inventory, what you can order from your partners, and basically your data as a paper company, right? And it receives orders, and it can get the order and ask back some questions, some clarifying questions, but it basically receives the order and puts it out in your system, right? And this means that I could have my own agent. I'm a company, I'm a lawyer company, right? I'm a lawyer firm, and I use a lot of paper. And so instead of having to call them up and ask for paper and order paper, and usually I'm ordering a bit too much or too little, I could have an office manager AI. And this office manager agent would do a lot of things, right? It will take care of the water containers, it will take care of the cleaning, but it also could order paper for me, right? And it can look at my inventory, at my requests, and saying, hey, I'm running out of paper, let me contact this other agent that I know how to talk to and order paper for you. And so we're automating these jobs of not only the whole of office would stop to exist, but I would no longer need an office manager, or my office manager would be way less, let's say, busy with this kind of things. They could focus on some other things. And so you're starting to see, like, if each company has at least one public-facing agent, then whole departments can start to, I wouldn't say cease to exist, but get reduced a little bit. Or the people working there can be a little bit less busy and a little bit more focused on some other things. As maybe they're tasked to researching new kinds of paper. I'm not sure if there's something to invent there, but there could be. But now you start to see, like, you can actually start to have this communication between companies. This communication even within the departments of your company. So you can have an agent receiving the orders, some other agent that is in a warehouse playing out and planning what the routes are to deliver all these paper orders. You can start to have this, and A2A enables this communication between agents.
So if we zoom out a little bit, so we basically have the component MCP that is augmenting the agents to talk to tools, to talk to backend systems, and then we have A2A. Again, lots of abbreviations in this episode, but that's basically scaling up, let's say, the network of multiple of these entities, these AIs, to be, again, interacting with each other, similar to like a human. So we're basically building a matrix in real time. So we're basically just giving different step in the function, in the sense of, first we need to augment agents with tools, then we need to make sure that they're actually communicating with each other in a secure way. So we're just literally building these Lego blocks of in the future, and how you mentioned that point, that certain large tasks, not only a small process, but large interrelated tasks can be automated end to end with agents. Benna, you want to add something to that as well?
I just came up with another example for this, the autonomous driving. It's probably, you can kind of have an agent with the capabilities of vision and checking the systems and so on. And then they would be integrating into the city network to communicate with other ones and to the city management to understand where the other cars are and so on.
And we can finally have zipper merge, because no one actually gets it right. And it annoys the hell out of me to try to merge to a lane and no one's doing zipper merge. And it's so easy. But yeah, that would be one example.
So it's like a fleet. It's like, yeah, similar to like, let's say a fleet of like Teslas or a fleet of e-Audis or any Chinese
the fact that
manufacturer
this
on that notion.
An open protocol, it doesn't have to be a fleet of just Teslas.
Yeah,
Teslas could be talking to Audis, could be talking to BYD, or
that's what the point I wanted to make. So you have these fleets of the actual brands, let's say, that are currently closed systems, but then you're opening up. And similarly to that notion of Audis, Chinese manufacturers, maybe BMWs and Teslas interacting with each other, you might have the agents across different companies, maybe even be the respective agents of these car manufacturers, but maybe some different agent, not a car itself, that are actually communicating on the entire supply chain. We are certainly on the verge in early 2025 to be, again, building the building blocks for a fully interrelated artificial intelligence world, which is slowly and steadily improving the brains of these entities, aka the large language models. But now in 2025, we're really building different components for global companies to be leveraging the entire system in the first place. I think it's a truly unique time to be in AI, because again, we see this literally unfolding in front of our eyes. So this is very cutting edge, very brand new. And to all in the audience that are again interested in learning more about these things, if you have a question, maybe drop a comment so we can go a little bit deeper in N8N, or we can go a little bit deeper in MCP if that's desired for future episodes. I have something also to quickly plot before we wrap up the episode. I was waiting some weeks to get into Manus AI. I think this was a highly hyped vibe coding tool / fully again integrated agent coming from China. And I was trying out a little bit, and I've been fairly involved in Lovable and Versal v0 already. I've been spending probably tens, if not hundreds of hours on these systems. And I need to say that Manus can do two things. I think it can be slower than the other ones. So Lovable is super fast, v0 is super fast. Manus took forever, like 2 hours. I don't know if it's my tier. Maybe I need to upgrade on my tier, but it was fairly slow. Then the output, I think maybe I haven't tested sufficiently as opposed to v0 that I spent many hours on. But it's certainly capable of doing a lot of things, but I think it's just on par. So I'm not sure if the hype is really worth currently of Manus. Maybe you mentioned, Troy, it's just good marketing. But I didn't see a huge difference in from Manus to, for example, Versal v0, especially if you build banking grade stuff, if you build highly, let's say, corporate world software. Versal v0, I think, is a lot more ready, I think, than Manus. That's just my take. Feel free to disagree. I don't know, Joao. Have you guys tested Manus or Lovable or v0, by the way?
I'm usually using the LMs directly to do, imagine code completion, like when you're writing a text to someone and it tries to complete your word. So it does that for like whole sentences, for little blocks of code. So I can still keep control of what I'm writing. I just don't have to type it out everything. So I'm writing at 3 times, 4 times the speed. To use those tools, I think, again, for POCs and like MVPs, they work. I think they'll start to fail if you build bigger things. And I've Personally, I've not been doing that because I don't really have the time. I'm planning to in the next few days, but I've seen people using them both in live streams and both talking about it online, and it really kicks in when you start to have a whole lot of features, a whole lot of buttons in your interface and in your system, and it's hard to lose track. And so instead of now reusing a button you already have, you're starting to create a new button for something, and then you end up with a bunch of toggles and buttons and menus that do the exact same thing.
I think it's a really good point. I mean, I was thinking about exactly the same. I mean, I think it's the same with Manus, with Lovable, with Versal v0. Imagine you have, 50 engineers that are each vibe coding with these tools, committing code to a common code base. And every single time you do one iteration of vibe coding, meaning one prompt and then one recompute of the entire code base of one user, there is a probability that the rest of what you didn't want to touch in terms of code, meaning could be any functionality, any buttons, might also be changed. It happened to me multiple times. So the feature that I actually wanted to build, a small button or a small change of a particular menu or a query, was perfectly executed, but it also at the same time changed 15 other features that I didn't want to be touched in the first place. And I think if you, Swiss business, or even some mid-sized to large-sized companies are testing these tools and you scale it across your engineering teams, I think it's just too many degrees of freedom of possible issues coming from these recomputations of each and every single, let's say, prompt that you do. So I don't think they're actually ready to be used by even more than 3 people. It just seems to be a super cool enhancer of one individual, meaning each of us individually. But then once we have to interact with Manus, Lovable, and Versal, let's assume we are actually building a software together and each of us is using one of these tools, I think it just becomes incredibly messy. And we're bug fixing probably 90% of the time and 10% we're actually just trying to understand what just happened in the first place. Okay, so that's this notion very briefly again. These 3 systems are really good. Manus AI, Lovable, and Versal v0, testing prototypes, building stuff fairly fast and fairly straightforward, but they're not ready for multiple teams, they're not ready for multiple people, and they're not ready for the reasons that we mentioned before, security and privacy-wise. Let's wrap up with one more notion. I think we've all seen it on X, tweeted multiple times by Sam Altman. He's again hyping up some new product lines. He teased quickly the months to come up time period of O3, the full model, O4 mini, and Chat GPT 5. Bene, what's your anticipation degree there? Medium, low, or high for these models?
For GPT-5, it's let's be honest. OpenAI has been breaking barriers each time they release a model or game. Like they released the image model for GPT-4. Man, it's amazing. So expectations are high up there. And actually, last week we talked about the open weight model that they're going to release. Now that I think a bit more, since normally when you kind of release open source things, it's try to increase the adoption. So it's probably going to be a lower version of GPT-5. So people can use and increase the capabilities and maybe toggle on the tools that can then be used for the premium version, which has way better capabilities. But still, it could be something that the community with the open source can do amazing things. So I think we have a really game-changing thing coming up. You can disagree with me, João, but
I think there's a whole lot of hype. I don't know any CEOs out there doing hype as good or as efficient as Sam Altman, because he's tweeting stuff or is posting stuff on X. I don't know if there's a verb for it now, and people are really paying attention.
I'm always so confused if it's still tweeting.
He's ultiming.
Yeah, but Sam Altman, like right now, as the king of hype, he's announced and teased a whole lot of models, and it is good that OpenAI is one of the top players in this game right now. And they'll be the top players for a while because they have the money, they have the funding to do pretty much whatever they want. I am skeptical, especially for the open source ones, for this one specific reason, that is the current top LLMs, not open source ones, but the GPT-4o, the Geminis, the Claudes, like the top models of each line, they're so big that they're impossible to run on any consumer grade software or hardware. Right? You need at least 3K GPUs in your house to be able to run them. And no one, I don't know anyone that has the kind of systems and this kind of hardware in their house. This is pretty much reserved for enterprise grade data centers. and they're pretty expensive. And they're getting more expensive not only because of tariffs and all the geopolitical war going on, but also because of the demands. Like no one can produce them as fast as people are buying them. And so you can build an open source model, you can release it, and it can be really, really good. But it's very hard to have an open source model that you can actually use on your computer or in a reasonably priced data center at that size. So there's been a lot of improvements on that, but it's still like trying to race a Formula 1 car with a really good Audi. Audi makes nice cars. I like them. They're fast, but they're not Formula 1 fast. So it's
Still,
completely
man.
different, the mechanics.
I understand what you're saying, but they released DeepSeek, which created like moves in the AI world, open source model that you kind of could run on not an expensive
You
hardware.
kind of could run. I think that's a nice point. Yeah, DeepSeek was like a standoff model, and I hope to see it more. I'm just skeptical. I believe it when I see it. I'm looking forward to having the open source model from OpenAI, but until I actually have it and I know the stats, I know how big it is, and how many GPUs will I need to actually run it, then I'm just skeptical. And for GPT-5, yeah, go ahead, Ben. Go.
Sorry. I said kinda because you could run. Probably it won't be 40K GPU, but on a 2K GPU you could run easily and with good results. And it's not only DeepSeek. Gemma 3, it was released with 27 billion parameters. So it's quite fairly small, and it's of course not as good as GPT 4.5, but it can do so much at a cheap cost. It's worth.
But for the people out there, because not all of them are developers or gamers, a 2K GPU is not something people usually have. I do, because I've been gaming for a while, and GPUs are immensely useful for gaming, and I've been doing AI also for a while, and they're good for that too. But for most people, I don't think they'll have graphics cards in their houses, in their homes, that are worth 2, 3, or 4K. And I think those GPUs are out of stock right now, and I think the price is going to go up.
It's exactly true. Maybe we can take that notion to quickly wrap up. I think this episode number 5 goes into the history as the one that we use the most abbreviations. So maybe
just wait
on the
for next week.
We used N8N today, which is an AI agent workflow builder. You can build, I would say, pretty great systems with this particular builder. We talked about MCP, which is the protocol that agents are talking to tools and can leverage them. We talked about A2A, which is the Google announced agent-to-agent protocol. Again, bringing up the network effect so we can have multiple agents from multiple companies or within a company talking to each other. We talked about context. It is not an abbreviation, but an important element of AI. Basically, the input could be anything that goes into the LLM. These context windows is basically like you as a human, you can receive information and you need to compute it at the same time. Computation or compute means the actual effect on the cloud. So I can just probably go on with that.
We have Merriam-Webster over here.
O3, O4, ChatGPT 5 are the last ones that we talked about. Out soon, hopefully in the months to come. Gentlemen, it was a great episode. A bit more technical than the previous ones, but we hope we still were able to cover some ground today. Anything else to add, Bene, Joao, before we wrap up?
No.
We'll let João say this.
I think
it's a sentence this time.
It's really important to tune in next week because things will probably have changed. Like they did from last week and they did from the week before. So keep tuned because we're online. We're seeing everything that's going on the AI world and bring it up to you nicely packaged in the form of conversation and disagreement.
Exactly.
You're missing João. Yeah, this is the year.
And I'm pretty sure by now that this is the year.
This is probably the week, and then it's the month, and then it's the year. It's like each and every week something is changing. Great. Gentlemen, thank you for joining again. Once again, for the audience, each and every single week we do these episodes. They'll be available on Spotify, on YouTube. We also do TikTok Shorts. Anywhere that you have a comment, we are highly looking forward to these particular elements. Today, for example, was mentioned that we should be covering MCP. Great. See you next time in the next episode, number 6 in a week. And until then, take care.